Hey, Ty Newton, back after a bit of a break to answer more questions about my debut album, The Future Isn't What It Used to Be. At this point, the entire album is released, so everyone can go and hear it. So if you end up having new questions for me, you can send those to me in comments or DMs on other platforms, and you can even reply directly to my email newsletter. Speaking of which, I have a newsletter. You can follow it or subscribe to it. If you want a reliable way to keep up with music artists whose work you enjoy, social media is not it. If you join my newsletter, you'll get occasional updates from me just when I have something meaningful to say. And guess what? You won't miss them in a fire hose of noise from social media. Okay, so each of these videos has been loosely associated with one of the 10 songs on the album. This one is connected with track 5, Lioness. This time, I'm just going to jump right in. One of the questions I've got this time gives me an opportunity to directly introduce the concept of the song. All right, so let's jump right in with question 1. This is from Tull. As I said in one of the earliest videos, Tull sent me so many questions that they have at least one question in every single one of these videos. So goes the trend. Tull asks, in the artwork, do the 2 orbs represent the 2 characters? That's the way I was contemplating the imagery. I love it. You pretty much nailed it. So there might be a few exceptions, but generally speaking, yeah, the light sources that I have in all of the album artwork are often representative of a couple characters. So I really love this question because visual design being my profession and my other big passion, it's really fun to get into exactly what's going on in the artwork for this record. First of all, I originally had a totally different album cover, and I even created a few covers for the singles. For those who don't know, every song on this record was released as a single leading up to the complete release of the album. And I had already developed these other covers that I really liked before stumbling on this unifying idea of the empty shelf with different light sources representing each piece of the story. And so I felt like as much as I really loved what I had done with the existing covers at that point, I really had to scrap them all, or at least shelf them, pardon the accidental pun, for some other project because this unifying concept really needed to happen. And you can kind of break it down like this. Anytime you've got one light source, the character is alone. And when there are 2, they're together. The way the light is treated is always expressing something in the lyrics and mood of the song. So a little more specifics. For Home, you've just got this empty shelf and this neutrally colored spotlight, highlighting the emptiness of the shelf, but also sort of setting the stage, like something goes here, and it's not there yet. Simple, obviously, we've got 2 light sources that are just barely coming together. It's the beginning of something. One is a little bit warmer and cooler, so they're mixing and influencing each other. And then Happier Words does the same thing, but the colors are richer and their positions are different. So there's sort of the sadness is falling away down below and the warmth is taking over on the shelf. And that one, I'm not sure that it cleanly represents the 2 characters so much. You could argue that it does in a sense, but it's not so literally that way this time. With Forever and Anon, everything's kind of pulling apart. I almost think of it as some centrifugal, I'm going to mix them up, but a force that is spinning, and there's a lot more dynamism happening. They're sort of both being pulled apart and being pulled inward toward each other at the same time. Or it's like there are these 2 forces, the past and the future, the relationship and the absence of one, the imagination and the reality, expressed in the song lyrics. And then we come to Lioness, which is why I especially think this is a great question for this video. Lioness, they're still spinning, but there's this stillness about them and this steady pattern happening. It's like you've got the sun and the moon and they are just circling each other perpetually, but never able to quite align and never able to quite meet. The cover of Rally Love sees one light source that is splitting in 2 and has this kind of fire and red hot emergency above the shelf. And then down below, the cool depths of the ocean sorrow, almost indigo, I want to say. The cover art for Rally Love and Lovelorn, those two both represent really the ending, the breaking apart and the shattering of the relationship. Lovelorn Lullaby has the light basically shattered into many pieces, and it has that bokeh effect, like blurry vision that's having trouble focusing. The focus is on the shelf in the distance. It was actually inspired by these icicle lights that were in a particular space during the time that inspired it, and when out of focus, they just look like this sea of stars. Then when you get to The Future Isn't What It Used to Be, you just have this blank shelf. It's actually daylight, and so it's awash in light, but it's the loneliest of them. It's the emptiest, the plainest. I think Coal in Hand is kind of obvious. You've got the fire, the anger, and it's deep down inside casting this dramatic light upward. But it's not on the shelf for good reason. Reverie Mourning is a bit different. You've got this beam of light that's cutting through. It's just touching the shelf, but it's not really hitting it. And there's this line at the end of the song about the morning sunlight striking the eyes of the speaker and pulling them out of their recurring dream that's become a nightmare. And so it is the dawn light piercing through the midnight of the dream. And then plainly, the album cover is that same cover, but instead of it being dawn light, it is moonlight. And so it's more representative of still being inside that dream, that whole story arc, with the source of light there, but just barely missing the shelf. It was so satisfying stumbling on and developing this cohesive, unifying theme for the record. There are probably some ideas that I'm forgetting to explain in this. If you notice any other details that mean something to you that I didn't get at, I'd love for you to let me know. Okay, Michelle's got question 2. Michelle has funny questions. This might be the most hilarious question I received. So first of all, Michelle starts, I'm interpreting a lot of Lioness to be quite sexual. Quoting a couple lyrics, she goes on, when you are feeling crescent, I will be gibbous. She says, maybe I'm just a pervert, but I imagine this is a metaphor for PIV. And here's the second lyric. In my dream, you are a mountain that I climb, and I scale every disc of your spine to dig into the summit. She wonders if this is about climaxing. Overall, I interpreted it as a sexual song, but those two parts especially stuck out to me. I hope I'm right. I hope you are too. Okay, fair. While I'm not sure you're entirely wrong, if you're right, it's not exactly conscious. It's definitely both very intimate and dramatic. So at this point, I really need to explain the concept of the song a bit. The song is about maintaining balance in a relationship where connection is becoming more difficult. Literally, you've got two people who have inverse work schedules and also to some extent inverse week schedules, or at least there are phases where it's that way. So they have very limited time where they're both awake and available at the same time. And a major concept in the song is that they take turns watching over each other sleeping, like standing guard, while much of the time spent near each other, only one of them is conscious. And it's becoming more difficult to know what the other person is thinking. But the love and attraction is still there. And it's a marked change from a lifestyle where communication was really effortless and they were often very well aligned, as expressed in some of the earlier songs. So the music is meant to evoke their mismatched circadian rhythms and also intense dream sequences. There's definitely a ton of passion and tension and drama and attraction. And yeah, I think you could argue that there's quite a bit of room for sexuality and all of that. And for you to interpret the lyrics that way is fantastic, in my opinion. And look, If someone chose to have a really good time to this song, I'd love that. All right, everybody, question 3. I've got a question here from my dad. So my dad asks me, I've heard successful producers talk about creating a soundscape like a painter uses a palette of colors. This is such a dad question. I love it. Did you use any unique or unusual methods to get the sound you were looking for on this recording? Yes, I did. Okay, I love this question. It's tough to answer. I know the question isn't literally about colors, but I certainly have at least a hint of synesthetic experience of colors with a lot of music. For those who are true synesthetes, I'm not talking about like the literal synesthetic thing where you literally are seeing colors or you're tasting music or something like that. But I have a very strong association in my mind. I don't know how truly connected that is with true synesthesia, but that's a whole interesting topic in itself. But when I'm associating a color or a tone or something like that, or a palette even, with a song, as far as deliberately creating that soundscape, I think it actually often probably happens in the inverse for me. When I begin with a song, I'm not so much deliberately coloring the music as I am reacting to the palette that I sense in the music that I find myself playing. At least I think that's what I'm doing. I tend to assign personal meaning and pair lyrics based on that tone and palette that I'm experiencing as the music comes to life. Even in production, where I'm making active decisions, I think it's largely unconscious for me. I definitely have my instincts, though, with percussion choices and accompaniment and distortion and qualities like that. So maybe I'll answer this with an example. In Lioness, there's this delicate stillness of just the acoustic guitar. And this is fairly representative of the whole album, right? I have a lot of the acoustic guitar is sort of the bones of the record, and then the production and the accompaniment is built up around that. Lioness is a good example of this because it has this orange and blue represented both visually with the single artwork and in the music, representing day and night and this cyclical transition back and forth between these different states. So with Lioness, you have the stillness, just the quiet, delicate acoustic guitar of evening by oneself while the other person is asleep. And then that contrasts with the deep, warm, thundering percussion that comes in and the rich cello swells and melodies that sort of swirl in, and the bending notes come in to sort of represent the transition into this surrealist dream as the protagonist experience slips under. And that percussion also has this sort of quasi-tribal and ritualistic feel about it to its rhythm. But even that was sort of reactive. It was more like the lyrics were paired with it, because that was in the guitar part that's actually one of the oldest musical parts on this record. I invented that guitar part so many years ago. And that sort of tribal rhythm, to me, it sort of gives it this sense of a lioness on this metaphorical hunt. And it also maybe represents this slow, cyclical chase between night and day, where the race is never really won, and this dream and wakefulness. And then the meaning of the song was built up around that. After that, I am actually then making some deliberate choices to lean into that and build up that concept in the music, in the palette. But yeah, I think I'm only semi-conscious of these palette decisions, yet they do seem to have a pretty strong influence, which you must have picked up on, and I really appreciate that. I always do. Thanks, Dad. And thank you to everyone for the questions, as usual. Please spread the word that the album is out there. Send me new questions. I love answering these. I'm learning new things myself, honestly, and hopefully I'll be back before too long with the next one, but I also think it's good to just let it take its time. With that, please be in touch, subscribe to my newsletter, don't rely on social media, and I will catch you in the next one. It's definitely both very intimate. I hope you are too. Uh-huh.